Our days don't always go the way we expect. This girl ended up saving a crying bear cub, and just wait until you see how the mama bear reacted. Alice was out on what would be her last hike in the mountains before heading off to basic training. She was nervous, but also full of excitement. She felt like growing up right on the edge of these mountains gave her a bit of an edge, and maybe that would help her in the challenges ahead. So she was saying a temporary goodbye to the place she'd always called home. She'd climbed pretty high up when she suddenly heard a strange, heartbreaking noise. In all her years exploring these woods, she'd never heard anything like it. Slowly, she walked toward the sound, being as quiet and careful as she could. What she found completely stunned her. It was a bear cub. It had fallen off a steep cliff and was stuck on a ledge halfway down. The cub looked terrified and was crying out for its mother. The sounds were gut-wrenching, and Alice quickly realized she wasn't the only one who felt that way. Up at the top of the cliff, the cub's mother was there, clearly in distress. The mama bear was pacing back and forth, frantic, looking for some way down to her baby. She even tried climbing down a few times, but each time she did, loose rocks and sand tumbled down toward the cub. Alice stayed off to the side, watching from a safe distance. Normally, bears are strong climbers, but this cliff was so steep that getting down was nearly impossible. Going down was far harder than going up, and the mother bear's attempts only brought her closer to the edge of danger. After a while, it seemed like the mama bear realized she couldn't make it. That's when she really started to panic. Now both the cub and its mother were crying, loudly, desperately. Their calls echoed through the trees, and Alice had never heard anything more heartbreaking. Maybe because of the sounds or the sight of its mom, the little cub suddenly tried to climb up on its own. Alice held her breath as it struggled upward, but the cub was small and unsteady. It only made it a short way before losing its grip and falling. Alice gasped out loud. For a moment, she thought she was about to see something terrible. But thankfully, the cub landed back on the same ledge. The thud sounded awful, but at least it hadn't fallen all the way to the ground. But then Alice noticed something worse. The cub's back leg had punched through a soft patch in the rock. It was stuck, and it looked like it was in a lot of pain. The little bear squirmed and tugged, but it couldn't get free. The more it pulled, the more dangerous the situation got. Alice stood there, heart racing. She knew she couldn't just watch this happen. She had to do something. Everything inside her told her she had to do something. Alice was an experienced rock climber, but today she hadn't packed any of her usual climbing gear. Her house was too far away to go back for it. By the time she returned, it might be too late. She knew it would come down to her instincts and her hands. It was dangerous, no question, but she couldn't just walk away. She had to try. She did have a rope in her backpack, but there wasn't anything nearby to tie it to. That meant she'd have to free climb. Moving quickly, she emptied out everything she didn't need from her bag. Then she shared her live location with her parents. She told them she wasn't hurt or in any danger, but she'd check in again in about an hour. It was just a precaution. If something went wrong, at least someone would know where she was. Getting too close to the distressed mama bear wasn't an option. Alice would need to climb down the cliff first, then move sideways along it to reach the spot where the cub's leg was trapped. She carefully began her descent over the edge. Right away, it felt different than her usual climbs. Way more nerve-wracking. Without a harness, every move mattered. The cliff was unusually smooth, and there were hardly any proper places to grip. It was one of the toughest climbs she'd ever done. With only her fingertips and the edges of her shoes gripping the rock, she inched her way down. Then her foot suddenly slipped. For a terrifying second, she almost lost control. But she pushed her weight back and caught herself just in time. Her heart was pounding. She reminded herself that basic training would throw her into even scarier situations. This was just the beginning. She had to keep going. Sweat ran down her back in the heat, and she felt the sting of the sun on her neck. She couldn't stop, not even to breathe. Any break in focus could be a mistake. After what felt like forever, she finally reached the same level as the ledge. Now she just needed to move sideways to reach the cub. This part was even riskier. But then her feet finally touched the ledge. It wasn't wide, but after what she'd just been through, it felt like luxury. Compared to hanging on by her fingertips, this little patch of rock felt like a break. She'd tried to block out the sounds of the cub crying and the mama bear calling from above. But now that she was closer, things took a turn. The mother bear saw her approaching the cub, and that made her even more frantic. She growled louder, pacing and sending small rocks and dirt raining down on Alice. Every step now felt even more dangerous. Any one of those falling rocks could hit her. Alice couldn't be sure when something heavier might tumble down. It was clear the mother bear didn't know what Alice was doing, and she was terrified for her cub. The mother's panic seemed to pass down to the cub too. It started squirming and pulling harder, trying to get away. And even though it was just a cub, Alice knew that if it thrashed too hard, it could seriously hurt her by accident. She also worried that the cub's frantic movements might cause it to slip right off the ledge. Staying calm, Alice positioned herself with her back flat against the cliff and started speaking to the cub in a soft, soothing voice. It didn't happen right away, but slowly the little bear began to settle down. Something about her gentle tone seemed to reach it. As she inched closer and got a good look at the cub's trapped leg, it looked like it could come free easily, if she could just turn it the right way. But before she tried anything, Alice needed to make sure the cub wouldn't lurch or twist and risk falling. To be safe, she pulled out the rope from her bag and gently looped it under the cub's front legs and around its middle. She was amazed when the cub didn't resist. What happened next caught her completely off guard. This little bear, now calm and still, leaned into her chest as she secured the rope. It rested its head against her, almost like a hug. The moment hit Alice hard. Tears welled up in her eyes. This tiny animal was placing its full trust in her. That made her even more determined to save it, no matter what. She tied the rope around her own waist too, gave the cub a soft scratch on the head, and gently freed its back leg from the hole. The cub let out a small, pained cry, but it didn't sound serious. The leg was scratched and bruised, but thankfully it didn't seem broken. Now came the hardest part, getting both of them out of there. Climbing back up the cliff with the cub was out of the question. The weight would throw off her balance, and it was just too heavy to carry while scaling the rock. It wasn't safe. She knew one wrong move could be fatal for both of them. Going down the cliff meant they'd be farther from the mother bear. It would be harder to find her again, but at this point it was the only real option. If she wanted to keep them alive, they had to get down first. She'd figure out how to reunite them later. With the rope tied securely around both of them, Alice prepared to lower the cub. But it wasn't easy. There were barely any decent spots on the cliff to use for leverage, and she had to rely completely on her grip and balance. She prayed the weight wouldn't pull too hard on her. Carefully, she eased the little bear over the edge. The cub did not like it, not one bit. From the cub's point of view, it must have seemed like it was suddenly being dropped off the ledge. At first, it probably felt terrifying, but once it realized it wasn't falling, the little bear began to calm down. Alice let the rope slide slowly through her hands, making the descent as gentle as possible. She had to lean her whole body back, almost lying flat against the cliff, to act as an anchor. The cub didn't weigh as much as she did, but it wasn't far off. It took everything she knew, every bit of skill and focus, to lower the bear safely. Things were going pretty well until the cub got closer to the ground. That's when it got excited and started wriggling. The sudden movement made it much harder for Alice to keep control. The rope began to tug at her harder, pulling her bit by bit toward the edge. But then she noticed the rope slacken. She peeked over and saw the cub had made it, safely on the ground. Relieved, she gently moved the rope aside so it wouldn't be a danger to the little bear. Now it was her turn to get down. But first she needed a break. Her arms were burning and her shoulders ached from holding the weight for so long. She sat still, trying to breathe and steady herself. But just as her heart rate started to slow, it suddenly spiked again. The ledge under her didn't feel right. It was shifting beneath her. Small pieces of rock were starting to break off. She'd known the ledge wasn't super stable. After all, the cub had broken through it earlier. But until now, it had held. Now it felt like the whole thing might give way at any second. The last thing she wanted was to fall, or worse, bring debris down on the bear below. So she slowly shifted to the side, found a better position, and started climbing down. She didn't have the luxury of a longer rest. The cliff below had more bumps and cracks than the smooth part above, so there were more spots to grab. But her muscles were exhausted, and every move felt like a fight against her own body. It felt like she'd been climbing for hours, but the ground still looked far away. Jumping was absolutely out of the question. She might survive it, but she'd definitely break something. That would end her military plans before they even started. Her backpack felt like it was full of bricks. It was dragging her down and making everything harder. Carefully, she searched for a flat enough area to stop and remove it. She checked to make sure the cub wasn't in the way, then dropped the backpack to the ground. The relief was instant. She felt lighter. But that didn't mean it got easy. Every inch of the climb down was still a challenge. The ground seemed like it would never come. Then, finally, her foot found something solid. She had made it, and the moment she felt the ground beneath her, her legs gave out beneath her. Alice couldn't believe she had actually made it. This strong, determined woman had given everything she had, and now she just collapsed onto the ground. There were moments during that climb when she wasn't sure she'd survive. Now, just lying flat on solid earth felt like the best thing in the world. But the sun was still blazing overhead, and she was completely drained. With the last of her strength, she crawled over to a patch of shade nearby and collapsed again, panting. She would have done anything for a sip of water, but her backpack was out of reach, and she couldn't even lift herself to go look for it. The cub came over and climbed right on top of her. It seemed way happier now. Its fear was gone. When it got close enough, Alice gently untied the rope from around its little body. She wanted to pet it, hug it even, but she was too tired to lift her arms. She needed to rest a minute before figuring out how to get the cub back up the hill. The cub rolled around playfully beside her. Then, all of a sudden, it stopped. It stood up on its back legs, ears perked and alert. Alice froze, listening. There it was, a rustling sound, branches snapping somewhere in the trees. Then Alice's heart nearly jumped out of her chest. The mama bear stepped out of the forest. She must have figured out where Alice was taking the cub and had gone around the cliff, down the mountain, and through the woods to find them. Alice remembered the last time she looked up at that bear, the way it had stared at her, not exactly with kindness. Was this how it all ended? But something unexpected happened. The mother bear wasn't even looking at Alice. As soon as she saw her baby, the cub ran toward her, and the two of them met with a joyful crash. They rolled together on the ground in a beautiful emotional reunion. It was so pure, Alice couldn't stop herself from crying. Wiping her tears, Alice figured it was a good time to sneak away. She tried to sit up, thinking it was best to give them space. But the mother bear didn't care about her. She was focused on her baby and didn't seem the least bit aggressive. Alice decided to stay put. She was too tired to move anyway, and honestly, she hoped the bear somehow understood that she meant no harm. But the cub wasn't done with her. It came bouncing back over to play, nudging her and trying to climb on her again. She gently tried to push it away, worried the mother might misinterpret the roughhousing. Her heart pounded, afraid of what might come next. Then something happened she never could have expected. As she watched from the ground, the mama bear turned and walked away with her cub. But then she came back. In her mouth, the bear carried something. It was Alice's backpack. She walked right up and dropped it beside Alice. No growl, no sign of anger, just a quiet gesture. Alice stared in disbelief. After that, the mother bear backed away and sat at a safe distance, keeping an eye on everything. Alice could hardly believe it. Shaking, she reached into her bag and pulled out her water bottle. It was dented and scratched, but the water inside was still cold. She took a few long sips, grateful beyond words. The forest had gone quiet again, and for a moment they just sat there in peace. Alice, the mama bear, and the little cub. It almost felt like the bear was standing guard, making sure Alice was okay before heading off. Alice had saved her baby, and now it seemed like the mother bear was quietly saying thank you by keeping her safe until she could get back on her feet. Lying there at the base of that massive cliff, surrounded by calm and the presence of two wild animals, was something Alice would never forget. Soon she heard voices calling her name. Her parents were getting close. Worried, Alice sat up a little straighter. She was nervous that the bear might get spooked or act out when other people showed up. But the mother bear seemed to understand. It was time. She walked over slowly, gave Alice's foot the lightest touch with her nose, then turned around. The cub wasn't quite ready to go. It bounded over and playfully rolled against Alice, nuzzling her like they were still friends. Alice gave it one last hug, and the little bear rested its head on her shoulder for a moment. Then the mother let out a soft sound, calling her cub. Just like that, the two of them slipped into the trees and disappeared. It was almost too incredible to be real. If it hadn't been for the giant paw prints all around her, no one might have believed what had just happened. Her parents were just relieved she was safe. Her earlier message had scared them, and they had rushed out the door the second she didn't check in. Her dad even climbed back up the hill to grab the item she had tossed from her bag earlier. Then the three of them started the long hike back home. That day never left Alice. She carried it with her through basic training and later through every tough day that came after. Whenever she hit a wall, she thought back to that moment on the cliff, how she pushed through her fear and found strength she didn't know she had. Years later, when she returned to visit those same hills, she saw the bear again. The cub had grown up. It even had a family of its own. And though she couldn't be sure, Alice always felt like it remembered her, from a distance, from that day. And that feeling? That was something truly special. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a little reminder of the strength we all carry inside. Come back soon for more incredible, heartwarming stories.